octopus. I am the octopus. I am the octopus. I am the octopus.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's MacLeod, Pisces, aka the Star Squid Avenger, the host of this show, the Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclast podcast. Today's episode is something that it kind of doesn't fit with most of our stuff, but it's just something I got really interested in and wanted to cover some stuff. I actually had to cut a bunch of stuff because I found so much crazy shit, but yeah. This episode is called Ultra-Terrestrial Cephalopods, aka, if I may be so cheeky, Cthulhufology. For long-time listeners, perhaps you're familiar with our previous Mantis Aliens episode. It was one of the more popular ones we did, relatively speaking, as far as our esoteric little corner of the internet goes. Today's topic is something I've prepared very much in the same vein as the aforementioned Mantis Aliens episode, only this time, it's cephalopods. Octopoids, squids, cuttlefish. It's actually octopuses, not octopi, I found out. That is the proper... Anywho. And to a somewhat more additional fringe degree, there's also going to be slight mentions of various other sea life, the Medusae family, aka jellyfish, which aside from the atmospheric anomalous life forms speculated upon by one Trevor James Constable, a fairly popular episode, relatively speaking. We like to keep it underground right here, you know what I'm saying? Anyways, but they've also been getting a lot more attention in ufology as of late. Not only that, but you've got a vast abyssal plane of strange occult material regarding the esoteric overlap of Lovecraftian occultism. Like I had to cut a lot, so I'm going to try and keep it in the realm of ultra-terrestrial adjacent, extraterrestrial adjacent. Yeah, but there will be some stuff about occultism and drug trips, etc. So when it comes to potentially mind-boggling high strangeness of our possible our ultra-terrestrial overlords, if there's any central a totem animal, a spirit animal, that permeates high strangeness, it is probably, I would say undoubtedly, got to be the octopus or the squid. Inherently alien life forms in more ways than one. These are the chronicles of cephalopod star gods that brought us civilization and maybe, just maybe, seek to initiate further mutations, or maybe, just maybe, eradicate us. But I tend to lean more towards the former than the latter, because from what I've seen, I've done a lot of literal deep dive, almost. I didn't, go into the water, but I've been watching a lot of stuff about octopuses, and they seem friendly. Most of the time. Most of the time. Let's take a look into the oceanic starry abyss and maybe gain a little insight into the potential overall benevolent, or is it malevolent, nature of what I've decided to cheekily call Cthulhufology, all one word. Whether you prefer to call some of this stuff Typhonian or Trans-Yogothian or some other wacky sounding mouth noise from an alien tongue, today we're looking into why exactly cephalopods are seen as archetypes and models for ultra-terrestrial intelligence, secret rulers, and occult symbols. Quick note, I also kind of wanted to, we'll talk about some adjacent sea life. Part of me wanted to include leeches as well, because there's a lot of weird overlap with the vampire lore and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, I had to cut a lot of stuff. So I don't know if you guys like this episode and find it interesting. Maybe I can do like a deleted scenes type thing, sort of a 1.5 sequel or whatever. But anywho, I'd like to open this episode with an excerpt from Jason Reza Giorgiani's book, Closer Encounters, because I think it very much encapsulates everything you'll need to know going forward as a most excellent a bit of introductory material, or introduction to today's material. What is overall some of the weirdest research I think I've ever done outside of the possible history of intimate human-ape relations. But anyways, like to hear it? Here you go. A group of 33 scientists from prestigious research institutions in 12 different countries collaborated on a paper that argues that the genetic structure of the octopus, and perhaps other cephalopods such as the giant squid, is more complex than anything that could have evolved on Earth up until the present. At the risk of oversimplifying the science, the idea is basically the following. Evolutionary biologists have developed a fairly rigorous map on the rise of complexity in organisms on Earth through various successive epochs from the Permian and Cambrian eras to the epoch of the dinosaurs and onto our own. Often punctuated by catastrophic extinction events, there is a marked increase in the complexity of the genetic code of organisms and their consequent capacities over the course of successive geological epochs. For example, even the dumbest and most diminutive monkey, let alone a higher ape, is a more complex life form than the largest of the most complex organisms of the Cambrian era. The problem is that the octopus has a genetic code that gives it capacities that suggest an overall more complex biological matrix than that of Earth in our geological epoch. The octopus has 33,000 protein coding sequences in its genome, which is more than Homo sapiens. This gives them an extraordinary capacity such as a large brain and sophisticated nervous system, camera-like eyes, flexible bodies, instantaneous camouflage via the ability to switch color, shape, texture, etc. Unlike humans, an octopus does not have a centralized brain and nervous system. It has a brain in each of its tentacles. The majority of an octopus's neurons, twice as many as are in its brain, are located in its arms, with each sucker on each arm having 10,000 neurons capable of conveying the sense of touch, taste, and even something akin to smell. This means that when an octopus tentacle is severed, it can continue to function for some time without the rest of the body. Weird. The octopus represents the most radically divergent evolutionary path to intelligence that we see in any non-human organism, with a mind that can be at all favorably compared to that of Homo sapiens. And they are very intelligent and playful. As early as the 3rd century CE, the Roman author Claudius Aelianus noted that, quote, mischief and craft are plainly seen to be the characteristics of this creature. They are tricksters. The reason that octopuses do not do as well as some other animals with laboratory experiments, such as intelligence tests, is that unlike other relatively stupid lab animals, including so-called higher primates like chimpanzees, octopuses get bored with repetitive tasks very quickly. Instead of performing the requisite task a 3rd or 4th time, the octopus will grab a hold of some apparatus, tool use, keep that in mind, it will grab hold of some apparatus involved in an experiment and find novel ways to play with the thing just for the sake of playing with it and entertaining itself. They are curious, flexible, adventurous, and opportunistic. Their tentacles afford them the ability to manipulate objects, and it has been noted that octopuses can create and disassemble compound objects. Construction, also. In effect, they are technologically capable in ways that exceed the capacities of birds and other non-primates. When they do get bored, octopuses also tend to become hostile in a mischievous way. They learn how to turn the lights out in the laboratory by squirting water at electrical sockets, and they will also squirt individual lab workers that they particularly dislike. They can easily recognize individual humans and are capable of holding grudges. So don't muck with don't muck about with an octopus. They will sometimes show contempt by dumping down the drain any food that is given to them that they consider beneath their standard. Persnickety as well. Other animals would either thoughtlessly eat such fresh food or reconcile themselves to eating it, or just let it sit there uneaten. But an octopus will make sure that while the feeder in the lab is watching, it makes a point that the food is substandard by walking all the way over to the outflow pipe and throwing the food down the drain in view of the person. When scientists or lab animals in the laboratory when scientists or lab attendants are not paying attention, bored octopuses will go snack on other animals in the laboratory and go back into their tanks without getting caught. Not only can they walk across floors, they can even open handles, or even open door handles. Those who are just fed up with captivity will find ingenious ways to escape, in some cases even reaching the ocean. This is easy for them to do because an octopus does not have any bones in its body and can consequently morph into any shape and get through any hole that is not smaller than the size of its eyeball. It is the ultimate shapeshifter. Shapeshifter. The octopus is also the ultimate master of disguise. This brings us to the most extraordinary capacity of the octopus and one of the most indicative of its being alien to the present or past biological matrix of Earth. To call the octopus a quote-unquote chameleon-like being would be inaccurate because the cloaking ability of chameleons and other color-changing creatures is of a different order altogether than that of the octopus. Whereas chameleons take time to change color, to blend into the background in a process that involves glands and the release of certain chemicals, the octopus changes color and texture instantly because its neurons are connected directly to millions of pixel-like sacs in its skin. The octopus is like a CRISPR genetic engineer who can recode not just the colors but also textures of its skin, not to mention totally change the shape of its body, virtually instantaneously by making split-second decisions with respect to the environment and engagement with predators or prey. The octopus is, after all, a predator itself. Octopuses get into fights with one another and they enjoy wrestling matches that reinforce their dominance hierarchy. Contrary to earlier assumptions about them being solitary animals, it was recently discovered that octopuses can come together in social groupings. These groups are capable of coordinating to take down sharks together and feast on them. Octopuses will even recruit fish into their hunting packs and knock a dumb fish with one of their tentacles if it breaks formation or forgets what it is supposed to do. Social hierarchy construction as well. For all of these reasons and more, evolutionary biologists think that the octopus could not simply have evolved in a linear fashion from the nautilus that lived in Earth's primordial oceans. There is an unaccounted for evolutionary leap in the genetics and capabilities of this creature. The 33 authors of the scientific paper published in the journal Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology propose that, quote, it is plausible then to suggest these inexplicably transformative genes seem to be borrowed from a far distant, quote-unquote, future in terms of terrestrial evolution, or more realistically, from the cosmos at large. They add that such an extraterrestrial origin as an explanation of emergence, of course, runs counter to the prevailing dominant paradigm. Icy asteroids or comets that thaw as they enter our atmosphere are proposed as the panspermia mechanism transferring this life form from an older planet or moon, perhaps Europa or Titan, with a more evolved biosphere to the less genetically complex biosphere of Earth. This is a virtual qualitative jump in molecular genetic strategy in a supposed smooth and incremental evolutionary lineage, a type of sudden great leap forward. One plausible explanation, in our view, is that the new genes are likely new extraterrestrial imports to Earth, most plausibly as an already coherent group of functioning genes within, say, cryopreserved and matrix-protected fertilized octopus eggs. Thus, the possibility that cryopreserved squid and or octopus eggs arrived in icy asteroids or comets several 100 million years ago and should not be discounted, as that would be a parsimonious cosmic explanation for the octopus's sudden emergence on Earth circa 270 million years ago. It should be added to the above that because, like all cephalopods, including giant squids, the octopus is an invertebrate. It barely leaves any identifiable traces in the fossil record. Octopus fossils are very hard to find, and of course it bears repeating, especially with respect to their cousins, the giant squids who stalk the abyssal darkness of the depths, that we have only explored 5% of the oceans. Let us, however, focus on that other possibility that was so briefly raised by these scientists, only to be as quickly dismissed as an alternative to their panspermia-type theory that the octopus is an extraterrestrial. Why would the latter be, quote-unquote, more realistic than the extraordinary characteristics of the octopus that were borrowed from a far distant future in terms of terrestrial evolution, if, as we have seen, time travel is regularly taking place in the oceans? Why resort to the speculative hypothesis that something like a nautilus evolved on another planet or moon somewhere without any empirical evidence for that? Why not consider the possibility that all of the evidence suggesting that the octopus is on the same evolutionary trajectory as the terrestrial nautilus is pointing us toward the correct conclusion, except that the octopus is from a far future point along this trajectory? Finally, if the octopus comes through from this far future biosphere of Earth, what else may have come through such vortices? Is there a superorganism in Earth's oceans that is to the octopus what humans are to monkeys? If anyone is thinking that it's not possible for something with the dexterity and perceptual capacities of an octopus to evolve into a technologically advanced species in the depths of Earth's ocean, Ivan T. Sanderson's book, Invisible Residents: The Reality of Underwater UFOs, ought to be consulted. Sanderson is not correct in thinking that the UFO or USO phenomenon in general can be explained by some undiscovered submarine culture of other intelligences. However, his remarks on the possibility of the development of technology underwater, including the use of fire and metallurgy, are profoundly illuminating and unexpected. It is possible both to weld metal and pour concrete, or its equivalent, underwater. Quote, if a superior technological type of intelligent civilization developed on this planet underwater, they would have likely gotten much farther ahead than we have, Sanderson said. Then he adds, having several millions and possibly up to a billion-year head start on us. He is not even considering the possibility that is being considered here, namely that this species, like the octopus, is from far in the evolutionary future of Earth and traveled through spatio-temporal vortices back to a time 270 million years before our present. Before pursuing that line of speculation, there is one last extraordinary, one might say preternatural, ability of the octopus that mainstream scientists have not studied out of fear for the consequences to their careers, but said ability has, nonetheless, been repeatedly demonstrated. As I have discussed at length elsewhere, many non-human animals are more psychic than humans, at least in our society. Dogs, cats, horses, birds, and many other animals have demonstrated extraordinary feats of extrasensory perception, or ESP, in numerous scientific studies. Well, it turns out that the octopus is the most psychic animal on Earth that we know of. Paul was an octopus at the Sea Life Center in Oberhausen, Germany, who was born in 2008 and sadly only lived to be 2 years old. But in those 2 years, from 2008 to 2010, Paul used precognitive abilities to correctly predict 12 out of 14 outcomes of soccer matches. This included 4 of Germany's 6 Euro 2008 matches, all 7 of the country's matches in the 2010 World Cup, and the victory of Spain in the 2010 FIFA World Cup final. In total, his success rate was 85.7% higher than any other animal or human psychic demonstrating ESP in any laboratory context ever. The setup was fairly simple. There would be 2 clear plastic boxes containing food, either a mussel or an oyster, and each would be marked with the flag of one of the 2 teams playing against each other in a given game. Whichever Paul decided to open was considered his pick of the winner, basically. What is most interesting is that he seemed to hesitate a bit, as if he was tuning in on the signal of the future outcome, trying to process it clearly before making a definitive choice. Also, in line with the psychology of these tentacled tricksters, Paul seems to like to show off to the assembled crowd. It is in itself a demonstration of his psychic ability that no one ever had to explain to him what they wanted of him in these guessing games. Paul knew intuitively that he was supposed to pick the winning soccer team. This presupposes a knowledge of soccer and of the meaning of sports, and also the meaning of precognition and the fascination that humans would experience on account of his demonstration of his competence in this area. A 2-year-old octopus did this. So, what are the major takeaways from this? One, the octopus as a biological anomaly. Their genetic complexity, for instance, the octopus has 33,000 protein coding genes, more than humans. In addition, they also possess an extremely fascinating innate ability to initiate RNA editing. This essentially means that octopuses can reprogram themselves on the fly, editing their RNA like software, basically, to adapt their neural output in real time. This is incredibly rare in nature and suggests a form of intelligence that's more fluid, responsive, and possibly even alien in architecture compared to our own. I pretty much had, and to a degree still have, no idea what any of this means exactly, but upon further research, it can basically be broken down like this. RNA editing is a molecular process where an organism can alter the RNA instructions after DNA has already been transcribed. In most animals, this happens rarely, but in cephalopods, especially octopuses, squid, and cuttlefish, it happens constantly and on a massive scale. So basically, DNA is your fixed genetic blueprint. RNA is a copy of DNA used to build proteins. Normally, the instructions run from DNA to RNA to protein, and it adheres to a very linear methodology. But octopuses can rewrite their RNA, like editing a sentence on the fly, to change the kinds of proteins they produce without altering their DNA. Most notably, they use this to modify neuronal proteins, the building blocks of the brain and nervous system. Most animals barely use this ability. Humans use it rarely, mostly for fine-tuning. Octopuses use it to remodel their brains dynamically in response to environment or temperature. And it's been described as being evolutionarily expensive. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I think what they're trying to say with the phrase evolutionarily expensive is that this essentially, it's intense rarity, basically, that this can be done on such a scale that octopuses can do it. So using RNA editing heavily means sacrificing DNA mutation in the regions you're constantly editing, which could slow down normal evolution. Cephalopods seem to lock in on parts of their DNA so they can keep editing them on the RNA level instead. It hints at a non-linear intelligence model. Their nervous system may be basically programmable in real time. This supports the idea that they have a kind of biological adaptability, very different from mammals, closer to software patching than hard-coded instinct. Self-rewriting biology evokes themes of alien adaptability, post-human intelligence, or fluid consciousness. Georgiani mentioned CRISPR earlier. It's very much in line with that, but having it built into your own body. Some have speculated octopuses are quote-unquote biological quantum computers due to their neurofluidity and editing ability. In the context of ultra-terrestrial or panspermia theories, RNA editing is seen as a possible signature of non-terrestrial origin, a molecular hallmark of an organism meant to adapt rapidly across dimensions or environments. Their nervous system spanned across their entire bodies, meaning they feel and think with their limbs, which combined with the RNA editing suggests a dispersed intelligence or even a modular consciousness. The whole body is brain, essentially. Their bizarre physiology includes camera-like eyes, complex nervous systems, the ability to instantly camouflage by changing both color and skin texture, as well as a certain anomalous biological feature that will perhaps prove most integral to much of the myth and folklore we'll be exploring in a moment. Octopuses have blue blood, literally. Much the same as is often attributed to many aristocratic elites or royal lineages throughout time, history, etc. Unlike most creatures, its nervous system is decentralized. The majority of its neurons are located in its tentacles, each acting with semi-autonomous intelligence. So they get bored easily with repetitive experiments. They play with objects creatively, tool using, complex puzzle and problem solving. They have the ability to escape captivity with inventive solutions, such as opening jars, doors, crossing floors to return to the sea in some instances. They can collaborate socially and even organize shark hunts in groups. They hunt sharks. Some species have even been observed forming alliances with fish and enforcing behavioral compliance, indicating not only strategic thinking and communication, but as well as abilities for organizing and applying interspecies social structures and hierarchies. Maybe keep that one in mind as well. A peer-reviewed paper by 33 scientists published in Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology argues that the octopus represents a quote-unquote quantum leap in evolution, difficult to explain through traditional Darwinian lineage from ancient nautiloids. A plausible explanation is panspermia, which, last I heard, is becoming more and more the scientific consensus for the seeding of all life on Earth. But I don't know, the the group mind may have changed on that since I've heard. I don't know. A plausible explanation is that they were cryopreserved inside icy comets or asteroids and came to Earth via that method. The theory of their extraterrestrial origins are presented as being far more likely than having occurred within the context of most standard Earth-based evolutionary models. The authors briefly consider a radical alternative. Perhaps the octopus originates not from another planet, but from Earth's own far future. Evolutionary leaps, genetic complexity and sophistication, and neural design may point to a species that evolved millions of years ahead and traveled backwards in time via temporal vortices in the ocean. Think Dragon Triangle, Bermuda Triangle, etc. Places like this, possibly. This raises the question, if octopuses came from the future, what else did? Could there be a future marine superorganism, just as humans are to monkeys? The text also references Ivan Sanderson's book Invisible Residents, which explores underwater UFOs, or USOs if you prefer, and the feasibility of undersea civilizations. Technology can be developed underwater, including welding metal and pouring concrete. If an underwater civilization started evolving millions or even a billion years ago, it could have technological superiority without ever emerging to the surface. This suggests that octopuses, and I'm still getting used to it. Octopuses, okay. This suggests that octopuses may be representatives or scouts from just such a civilization. Now, regarding Paul the Psychic Octopus, once again, 12 out of 14 soccer matches from 2008 to 2010, totaling out to an 85.7% success rate. Now, just keep in mind that Project Stargate Psychics got a pass at approximately 65% accuracy rate. So, way to go above and beyond, overachiever. Paul the Psychic Octopus, overachiever. Basically, this demonstrates potential precognition, the ability to detect future events. Not only that, but what is especially also interesting is he seemed to pick up on like the contextual understanding of what was expected of him. So this indicates, a presupposition that he knows about sports and soccer, or was able to glean it from other people's thoughts, possibly, as well as performance and engaging the audience, because these were like big deals. People were gathering in droves to watch him pick the winners for these soccer matches. Football, if you're outside of America, you're welcome. His performance surpassed human psychics and challenges current models of animal cognition and consciousness. It suggests that octopuses are not only intellectually advanced, but maybe naturally psychic. The answer to these potential psychic abilities, in fact, lies in their whole RNA editing ability. This essentially requires a mix of real science and psi phenomenon theories or parapsychology theories. Since they can rewrite their neural RNA on demand, allowing real-time rewiring of the brain. In fringe neuroscience and parapsychology, one common assumption is that psi phenomena, such as telepathy, remote viewing, precognitive ability, may require a brain that isn't locked into rigid pathways. Basically, in other words, a mind that can flexibly tune itself to different frequencies or fields, just like radio equipment, could potentially interface with non-local information via, I don't know, whichever model you prefer to use, the Aether, Chi, Akashic records, maybe the morphic field. That's probably, if we're going to stay with a more scientific or parapsychological model, morphic fields are probably the best way to Cephalopods might be doing this biologically. It's like a dynamic reconfiguration of the mind and consciousness that's sort of like liquid software. It's a model that matches what's been hypothesized for high-level psychic functioning. Cephalopods don't just have brains, their arms think too. Up to 2/3 of their neurons are in their limbs, which operate semi-autonomously but remain integrated. Maybe help illustrate this, remember that Dr. Octopus, his limbs could operate autonomously from his control of them, quote unquote. So could each limb potentially be pinging reality from different angles? The central brain kind of just integrating all of this somehow from different pathways, consciousness, organs. It starts to sound kind of like an embodied remote viewer. RNA editing in octopuses is often as a response to temperature, pressure, or environmental stimuli. But this echoes a psi model where psychic abilities are triggered by liminal states, enhanced by environmental shifts like electromagnetic fields, isolation, deep water. Think John Lilly in the what do you call? Oh, the chamber, the water chamber. I forget what they're called. Isolation tanks. Excuse me. So octopuses have biological structures that wake up under the same conditions that humans report psi contact or altered perception. They sacrifice some DNA-based evolution for the privilege of direct, mutable access to their neural programming. It's eerily similar to what neurological models have been mapped from people using mystical or shamanic trance states and things of this nature. They're sacrificing stability, such as ego or structure, to gain access to a liquid state of mind. Becoming a shapeshifter not just in form, but in thought process as well, essentially. So in speculative terms, their RNA editing could allow shifting realities, a sort of cognitive version of camouflage that mirrors not just what they see, but what they psychically or intuitively experience. Some researchers, such as Stuart Hameroff or Roger Penrose, have speculated that consciousness may rely on quantum processes within neural microtubules. Because quantums. Octopus's unique neural RNA architecture might facilitate such quantum coherence, enable psi-like perception through bioquantum computing, and their bodies are ideal for non-linear neural geometry. Soft-bodied physiology that allows total immersion in electromagnetic and fluid environments, seeing that the sea is the perfect conductor. It's all water, in case you didn't know. Octopuses may be naturally engineered via evolution, or something else perhaps, to operate with fluid, multi-centered, real-time adaptable intelligence, exactly the kind of mind required for psi phenomena, or non-local perception, or possibly even contact with ultra-terrestrial entities. Now, if you want to get really wacky, which we definitely love to do around here, from this data, we can draw certain conclusions from the implications herein. Octopuses are biological aliens. They may have arrived fully formed via panspermia through comets or asteroids. They could originate from a non-Earth biosphere, such as Europa or Titan. They may, using their abilities to use tools, engage in complex problem solving, the strange and almost extra miraculous ability to create and enforce social hierarchies across species barriers, which is there's so many weird, crazy implications in that I didn't even have time to really get them all down. But they may represent the future of Earth-based evolution, having somehow tracked back in time. Their advanced abilities are not alien, but possibly post-terrestrial, evolved on Earth, then looped back via spatio-temporal vortices in the ocean, Bermuda Triangle, Dragon Triangle, etc. They may be scouts of a hidden underwater civilization. They demonstrate advanced intelligence, mobility, shape-shifting, and possible psychic surveillance. Their biology suggests nonlinear convergent evolution that doesn't fit neatly into any Darwinian evolutionary models. Now, neither fish, nor alien, nor exactly future human, the octopus definitely challenges our entire framework of taxonomy, intelligence, and origin. It may be the Earth's most alien resident, whether by DNA, behavior, or consciousness. It's a natural shapeshifter and trickster, an organism that refuses to neatly fit any category. So whether it's a freak of evolution, a seeded alien species, a time-traveling entity from Earth's future, or a scout from a breakaway underwater super civilization or shadow biosphere, it remains a biological mystery with powers and intelligence that rival or exceed those of terrestrial primates. As science continues to study it, perhaps the octopus will reveal not just where we came from, but where we're going. The idea that cephalopods, and specifically octopuses, may possess some form of extrasensory perception has profound and unsettling implications, both biologically and philosophically. Unlike mammals, cephalopods process information in a radically distributed way. More than half of an octopus's neurons reside in its arms rather than in its central brain, allowing each limb to operate with semi-autonomy. This decentralized intelligence already challenges our anthropocentric model of cognition. But if these creatures also possess the ability to perceive information beyond traditional sensory input through some form of psi ability like telepathy, precognition, remote viewing, etc., then our entire understanding of consciousness, evolution, and non-human intelligence may need a bit of reevaluation. What would it mean if an octopus could feel the future? If it could sense the intentions of a predator before a movement was made, or if it could influence the behavior of prey or researchers through a form of mental suggestion, perhaps. Documented anecdotes, such as the astonishing predictive accuracy of Paul the Octopus during the 2010 World Cup, while often dismissed as coincidence or novelty, become more provocative when placed within a broader context of animal psi research. Animals like dogs, cats, birds, etc., horses, they've all repeatedly shown signs of anticipatory behavior that defy conventional explanations. With octopuses ranking amongst the most intelligent invertebrates on Earth, it's not necessarily outlandish to speculate that maybe they possess untapped cognitive abilities, potentially enhanced by their alien-ish neurology. If cephalopods do exhibit ESP, their intelligence might not only be orthogonal to ours, that's a word I learned previously, orthogonal, lateral, catty corner to ours in some way, it might represent an entirely different mode of sentience. One that kind of blends sensory output, their distributed cognition, like a brain trust throughout the body, and possibly even some kind of quantum awareness. This opens the door to intensely insane possibilities. Could some cephalopods detect the presence of human minds? Could they communicate telepathically amongst themselves, or with something else entirely? Could their ESP, quote-unquote, be a relic or preview, perhaps, of evolutionary directions far removed from the mammalian templates, perhaps seeded from another world, or even another timeline? These are the kinds of questions that place cephalopods not merely in the domain of biology, but into the hazy twilight realm of the paranormal, where science meets myth, and the line between Earth's deep history and perhaps cosmic horror become difficult to parse. We often look to the sky when we ponder gods and monsters, the stars, the heavens, the great beyond. But what if the true architects of our myths don't come from above, but below? The sea, primordial, crushing, terrifying, really. Sea thalassophobia. The potentials for horror are immense. It's the true abyss. And from this womb of pressure and silence from which all life has emerged, figures have always... there's always been teachers, half man, half fish, who whisper the secrets of civilization to man on land. There's Dagon, Oannes, Enki, the Nommo of Sirius B fame. All of these are mythic hybrids of human and something else aquatic. Scaled, tentacled, webbed, alien and ancient. They're the teachers from the deep. It's not just the Anunnaki from the sky. There are global myths, once again, in cultures that have never, ever encountered each other, that talk about these teachers from the sea. But perhaps it's not just myth. Octopuses, squids, cuttlefish, they're biological anomalies, arguably alien in both behavior and genetics. Their bodies can shift color, shape, and texture instantly. They possess distributed brains, more neurons in their arms than in their heads, each tentacle capable of independent thought, solving puzzles, picking locks, recognizing individual human faces, holding grudges. They've even been known to escape their sealed tanks and sneak across rooms just to play tricks on the scientists watching them. Their DNA is even stranger. A 2015 international research paper posits that the 33,000 protein-coding genes, more than the humans, are unlike anything else on Earth. The study speculates, quite controversially, that their evolution may have been seeded by extraterrestrial means. If the octopus is alien, then its intelligence is not just other, it's older. It evolved down a radically different branch of the tree of life, one that prioritized camouflage over dominance, or curiosity over control. Curiosity is a trait that I wish more humans had. Replace fear of the unknown with curiosity. And that might be the most terrifying revelation, really. They never needed us. We're not the apex species we pretend to be. We're just the noisy ones. They learned long ago how to vanish, how to watch, perhaps how to wait in the wings. Which begs the question, what else might be waiting? Ancient Sumerians believed the gods rose from the Apsu, the freshwater deep. The Dogon say that their amphibious gods came from Sirius B and still dwell in the water. And that weird freak Lovecraft, in a fever dream of reverse archaeology, gave us Cthulhu, a cephalopod god who sleeps, vast and dreaming, beneath the sea. You can always feel the unease when standing near deep water. It's a primal, inherited terror. It's not the fear of drowning, it's the fear that something is looking back. That below the waves are eyes, not just watching, but remembering. Perhaps holding grudges. These are the old gods. They were never banished, they were never slain. They simply went down into the depths, and they're still there. Across cultures and epochs, the sea has served not only as a boundary between the known and the unknown, but also as the cradle of the first gods and teachers, beings that emerge from the depths to reshape human destiny. And whether it's Dagon, the ancient Mesopotamian deity, part man, part fish, or the whispered legends of the Nommo, the amphibious sages of the Dogon people in West Africa, these figures share a common mythic structure. They're liminal entities, occupying the in-between of species, realms, and knowledge, and their arrival often signals a radical turning point in civilization. So like Joseph Campbell's monomythical hero with 1,000 faces, who must descend into the underworld to retrieve transformative wisdom, every shaman must delve into the underworld or some abyss to retrieve transformative, mutational wisdom. And these sea beings reverse the equation. They rise up from the abyss, bearing knowledge alien to human comprehension. Their appearance is often jarring, to say the least, but awe-inspiring and fearsome, reflecting the sacred terror of encountering the other. In myth after myth, they grant gifts: agriculture, astronomy, language, arcane ritual practices, magic. But always, the knowledge is double-edged. It elevates, but it also isolates. Those who engage with it are marked, set apart from their own kind. The shaman is often an outcast from society. Figures like Oannes, another Assyrio-Babylonian fishman, Enki, the Sumerian water god of magic and creation, and of course the Lovecraftian echo in figures like Cthulhu or his take on Dagon, belong to a cross-cultural pantheon. Whether cast as gods, monsters, or ancient astronauts, they follow a mythic arc that situates them at the dawn of time, beneath the thresholds of the ocean, emerging in a moment of crisis to seed civilization, and then retreating back into the deep, sometimes to return later on. This recurring pattern suggests an ancient archetypal intuition that true transformation comes not from the heavens above, but the abyss below, the hidden, the drowned, the subconscious. An alleged psychic medium in the UK. You know what? No, that's snarky and shitty. A psychic medium in the UK. Her name is Stephanie Cohen, and she claims that aliens act as her guides through life. Not only that, but they also frequently appear in her room late at night. I think you know where this is going. Not only that, but she also claims to have intimate relations with said bedroom intruders. And apparently the O in orgasm stands for out of this world. Don't worry, I hate myself more than you do right now for writing that joke. Quote-unquote joke. Her particular group of extraterrestrials, which she refers to as Team Spirit, which is cute, they hail from close proximity to the star Sirius, or double, even triple, possibly, star system of Sirius A, B, and C? Still not sure on that C part. And that they frequently whisk her away for astral adventures across the solar system and beyond in a UFO. One of her star-crossed lovers she's dubbed Ian the Octopus Man. I love that this woman from the UK has intimate relations with an octopus man, and his name is Ian. It's the most UK name you can get, probably. But Ian the Octopus Man is a spirit and a friend, though she very much vociferously notes, not a spirit boyfriend, just to make things clear. Stephanie won't be tied down. And it sounds like if Ian the Octopus Man wants anything more than that, he'd better put one of Saturn's rings on her fingers. That's my last horrible joke, I think. Hopefully. Okay, anyways. Rightfully skeptical Professor Christopher French denies the reality of this potentially interdimensional tryst and makes the counterclaim that this is all in Stephanie's head. That and a possible case of what's known as persistent genital arousal syndrome, by way of explaining the orgasms as potentially the only physical evidence, so to speak. I'd say cheers to you, Steph. If we could all be so fortunate. Or maybe, I don't know, that sounds like a blessing and a curse, actually. But also, props for standing up in front of the world and sticking to your guns and telling your story. Can't be easy. However, Professor French just can't help but harshen her groove. And yet, oddly enough, there does exist historical precedents for such relationships. In fact, it just so happens that these inhumanoid aquatic beings of historical precedents come from much closer to home. Actually, from right here on Earth. Often rising from the aquatic depths for some of that sweet, nasty consensual. Mostly consensual. You'll see. There's the radiant, regal, and otherworldly figure who was bound by a secret. In the hush of the twilight beside the haunted waters of Poitou, the nobleman named Raymondin met Melusine, a woman of unearthly beauty who promised him love, power, and legacy on one condition. He must never see her on Saturdays. That's what she's getting her tentacles did. Their union was fruitful. Castles sprang up as if by magic. Children were born, heirs of uncanny charm. But curiosity, or perhaps fate, betrayed the vow. And one Saturday, Raymondin spied through the keyhole and saw his wife in her true form. Half woman, half serpent. Or perhaps an octopus woman that was rather adept at disguise. Her lower body coiled like a dragon beneath the water, shimmering and scaled. When she discovered the betrayal, Melusine screamed and echoed through stone and time and vanished into the air. Yet even in her fury, she did not forsake her many children. The legend says that she returned to wail and weep whenever one of her descendants was about to die, a ghostly banshee with the tail of a sea serpent. But Melusine's tale does not end there. Her legend flows into deeper, darker, and much murkier ink-black waters. The Merovingians, the first dynasty of Frankish kings in what would become France, claim descent from a mysterious sea creature called the Quinator, a five-horned, possibly tentacled, aquatic beast. According to a now fragmented legend, the founder of their line, a fellow by the name of Merovech, was conceived when his mother was assaulted, or maybe seduced, by this beast from the deep. The result was a semi-divine child, part man, part whatever. Something else. It's here that Melusine reemerges not just as folkloric mermaid, but as a symbolic guardian of hidden bloodlines, one that merges human royalty with aquatic, serpentine, or draconic ancestry. In esoteric traditions, the serpent is often a stand-in for secret wisdom, alien intelligence, or forbidden power. The union of Melusine and Raymondin becomes a symbolic joining of surface man and abyssal knowledge. A pact with the unknown, sealed with love and broken by the gaze. Dan Brown, conspiracy theorists, and occult historians alike have linked the Melusine bloodline to the Priory of Sion, the Holy Grail, and even the Nephilim. She is not just a wife or a monster, she is a portal, a living myth that connects lost Atlantis, the Grail Kings, and the reptilian archetypes that populate dreams, nightmares, conspiracy theories, etc. If the stories are true, if blood remembers, then there are families walking among us still that are descendants of a half-human, half-aquatic being that aren't necessarily gods, but they're not wholly human either. Melusine is not just a folktale figure or a romanticized mermaid sorceress. In the shadowy backrooms of esoteric history, she becomes something far more potent, an emblem of divine right, occult initiation, and secret sovereignty. There's the Eastern counterpart of the Mandate of Heaven, and the many, many offspring of the Dragon Kings from the Abyssal Plains as well. So this, once again, it's another major global myth. Her bloodline was veiled behind secrecy and serpent lore. It courses through the veins of Europe's royal elite, especially the enigmatic and legendary Merovingian dynasty. The Merovingians, who ruled the Franks from the 5th to 8th century, were thought to be semi-divine beings. Their supposed progenitor, Merovech, was born of a queen who bathed in the sea and was either impregnated or mystically merged with the Quinator, the monstrous, possibly aquatic being. This echoes the Melusine myth so precisely that many occult researchers consider her a later folkloric echo or disguise for the same ancient archetype. But it doesn't stop with folklore. Occult traditions, particularly those explored by alchemists, Rosicrucians, and Templar apostolic secret societies, have long believed in a Grail bloodline, a sacred family line that carries not just physical royalty, but spiritual sovereignty, gnosis, and even alien or angelic DNA. Melusine becomes the mythic matriarch of this line. In alchemy, she's often depicted as the Red Queen or Serpent Woman, representing the prima materia, the raw chaotic substance from which true transformation and kingship is forged. To unite with her, as Raymondin did, is to undergo a symbolic marriage with the deep unconscious, a descent into the abyss in exchange for enlightenment and power. You'll find Melusine in the coat of arms and family crests of several noble houses, particularly in Luxembourg, Anjou, and Plantagenet, England. Her fish, or serpent tail, split in two, perhaps maybe 8, no. Specifically, when her tail is shown split in two, is the Starbucks logo, which is a nod to some ancient fertility and maritime goddess symbology. In Freemasonic lore, she is sometimes linked to the widow's son archetype, where she plays the role of the veiled teacher, the mystical feminine who guards forbidden knowledge. Some even suggest that the Black Madonnas of European cathedrals conceal imagery derived from the Melusine Tiamat, or other primordial sea goddesses who mothered lineages of sacred kings. And while I'm thinking about it, the Christian symbol of the Vesica Pisces, the fish symbol, has also been referred to as a map of universes that overlap. It's very strange. Strange indeed. And in modern conspiracy and esoteric speculation, Melusine becomes entangled with everything from the Priory of Sion to Montsegur, the Cathars, Atlantean priest kings, Agartha, various other lost continents or islands, Mu, Lemuria, Hyperborea. So it's not necessarily just a myth, but possibly a code or cipher for the survival of an ancient aquatic or cephalopod lineage that may not be entirely human and which may not have originated on the surface of this earth. So, in the eyes of a potential occult elite, she's the lady of the depths, the one who grants thrones, curses betrayers, and ensures that power does not rise from the land, from the water. In modern esoteric lore, especially in works like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and the Dan Brown thrillers in a fucking lesser degree, to a lesser degree, Melusine is cast as the feminine wellspring of what's become known as the Grail bloodline, a lineage believed to flow through medieval royals, once again, the Cathars, Templar orders, and secret societies, possibly preserving quote-unquote divine DNA. In this mythos, Melusine is the ancestral source, a serpent-masked bride whose union with mortal noblemen sealed the covenant between spiritual royalty and unearthly power. Her hybrid offspring were seen as both sacred and supernatural, their blood carrying the potential to unlock esoteric knowledge or initiate transformational rulership. These descendants didn't just inherit crowns, but they inherited a form of gnosis or psycho-spiritual insight and a mystical mandate to guide humanity. Oh, goody. So, whether real or legendary, the organizations and mythology of groups like Freemasonry, Rosicrucians, Templars, etc., are thought to guard her lineage, passing down secret rites and talismans believed to activate Melusine's transformative magic through hidden rituals or meditation of the waters of initiation. And just as Melusine bridges mortal men and abyssal waters, occult traditions often tie her to Atlantis and Agartha, legendary submerged or subterranean realms of lost civilization. Atlantis, some portray Melusine as an exiled Atlantean princess, fleeing the cataclysmic destruction of her homeland. Or, in the Agarthan model, her progeny settled in hidden chambers beneath the Alps, the Pyrenees, or even inside the lion's dens of England's countryside, forming a sort of techno-mystical elite in communion with Earth's subterranean energies. Thus, the Melusine bloodline becomes the living link between surface humanity and these lost advanced cultures, carrying sacred knowledge they once possessed and still guard through secrecy and myth. Melusine's serpentine form resonates with the archetypal sea mothers like Tiamat in Babylonian myth, or, to a lesser degree, Leviathan in biblical, stuff. And then, of course, you have the Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos. Tiamat was the chaotic primordial sea goddess who births monsters and gods alike, mirroring Melusine's dual nature as both divine and serpentine. Her shape-shifting tail and amphibious form aligns with Cthulhu's call of the deep, unfathomable, and alien, reinforcing the idea that true power lies within the abyss and not on the shore. Esoterically, Melanie, as she's also been called, if your name is Melanie and you're listening, look into this stuff. You might not like what you find, I don't know, but it's very interesting where we get some of our modern everyday names from. But Melanie, as she's also known, or Melusine, symbolizes the feminine access to abyssal secrets, the kind that transform or destroy the psyche when improperly unveiled. It's a common motif in Lovecraftian horror that often hinges on the terrifying knowledge of cosmic ancestry, and Melusine, so strongly tied to aquatic origins, embodies this dread. Her story speaks not just of transformation, but transgression, the forbidden union of mortal ambition with abyssal power. She serves as a nexus between grail-guarded bloodline conspiracies, which legitimize rulers not by land, but by inherited aquatic traits. Atlantean and Agarthan mysteries linking subterranean civilizations hidden beneath our feet. Primordial sea archetypes connecting to cosmic horror themes of knowledge too profound, too alien, sure to drive us into the depths of madness. Put simply, she's a portal between worlds, the aristocratic human dominion and the chthonic abyss, bridging earthly empires, underground sanctums, and cosmic dread. The Quinator, head back to him real quick, or it, rather. The Quinator is a strange and mostly forgotten creature whose legend surfaces in the shadowy beginnings of the Merovingian dynasty. If you couldn't tell, Quinator is broken down from quin, meaning 5, and taurus, meaning a bull, and it refers to a sea beast with 5 horns, a creature that sounds way more at home in the Lovecraftian abyss than a royal genealogy. According to the chronicles of Fredegar in the 7th century, the Quinator rose from the depths of the sea to seduce or assault the Frankish queen while she bathed near the shore. The resulting offspring was the aforementioned Merovech, the semi-mythical founder of the Merovingian line, said to be half human, half divine, or perhaps monster. This watery conception bypassed mortal lineage, granting Merovech and all of his descendants a bloodline infused with something inhuman, something other. It echoes the ancient themes of kingship bestowed not by the gods of Olympus, but by the deep alien chaos that predates the gods themselves. Although I will say, the Olympian gods are well known for, let's say, indecent assault. And Poseidon had quite a few children with surface folk. To the medieval mind, this origin story wasn't simply a metaphor, though. It legitimized the Merovingian rule through divine transgression, setting their line apart from all other royals. The Merovingians were said to bear the mark of the beast, perhaps a subtle webbed hand, psychic power, unnatural charisma. Who knows? It could have shown itself in myriad ways. And to possess this hidden knowledge that made them more like priests or seers than mere politicians, they were sacred monarchs, closer to the deep mysteries of earth and the sea than to the Church of Rome. In modern esoteric and conspiracy lore, especially the Grail and Illuminati-themed narratives, the Quinator is reinterpreted as a symbol of alien DNA, a sea-born chimera that seeded a bloodline destined for hidden rule. Under this, let's say, in this context, it's less a mythological bull and more of a primordial underwater entity, a proto-Dagon or ancient cephalopodic intelligence using the womb of a queen to insert its will into the affairs of men. It's no stretch to read the Quinator as a Cthulhuid cipher. Cthulhuid? Cthulhuid. I'm going to go with Cthulhuid. Creating a lineage of human vessels for something older than the gods. Perhaps something waiting beneath the seas of Earth, or even in the genetic shadows of mankind itself. If the legend of the Quinator seems like a forgotten myth locked in the dusty vaults of medieval history, think again. For many occult historians, secret societies, and even certain branches of royal genealogy, the strange aquatic origins of the Merovingians cast a long shadow across the centuries, one that reaches straight into the halls of modern royalty. The idea that royal bloodlines contain something non-human is not new. In fact, it's the cornerstone of the concept of divine right, or the Eastern equivalent, mandate of heaven. And it's a cult double, that kings are not merely chosen by God, but descended from something older, possibly even pre-Adamic, if you want to get to the biblical context. In this context, the Quinator isn't just a sea monster, it's a symbol of extraordinary, possibly extraterrestrial or interdimensional intelligence, whose genetic seed merged with humanity to produce semi-divine, quote-unquote, super elites, The Merovingians, whose bloodline was said to include psychic gifts, healing abilities, and even an aversion to conventional religious authority, were rumored to interbreed only within certain noble families to preserve their sacred essence. You know what I'm talking about. Over centuries, these lineages may have fed into the Carolingians, the Plantagenets, and later the Habsburgs, Bourbons, and Windsors. We're talking today's royal families. Whether through direct descent or intermarriage, the notion persists in certain esoteric circles that modern European monarchs carry diluted echoes of the original hybrid bloodline, the one fathered by the Quinator. Groups like the Priory of Sion, popularized by the book Holy Blood and Holy Grail, or later the Da Vinci Code to a much lesser extent, claim that secret societies have long guarded this bloodline, seeing it as the true Grail lineage. Not a cup, but a womb, a vessel of alien human synthesis. In this structure, modern royalty are not merely descendants of charismatic warlords or noble families, they are essentially the keepers of a legacy that may date back to pre-human epochs, seeded by intelligences that may have risen from the sea, fallen from the stars, or emerged through some kind of spatio-temporal vortex. And this explains the intense ritualism, symbolism, and genealogical obsession found in so many royal institutions. Symbols of tridents, shells, tentacled sea beasts, or even horned figures frequently appear in heraldry, architecture, and court pageantry. Not so subtle nods to the Quinatoric legacy. Even the mythic Arthurian line, often wrapped around British royalty, includes elements of watery conception, enchantment, and inhuman ancestry. In this framework, the modern royal houses are not merely political relics. They are living, blood-bound bridges between ancient and human forces and the modern world. Whether as protectors, prisoners, or puppets of these deeper powers, their role may be far more mythic and more monstrous than any of us are prepared to face. In her deeply esoteric and often unsettling work, particularly the piece titled King Kill 33, Bloodlines of the Nephilim, the book Clock Shavings, and essays such as The Merovingian Mythos, the late conspiracy researcher Tracy Twyman, R.I.P., outlines a cosmology where the Merovingian royal bloodline is not just historically significant, but occultly engineered. Occult eugenics. She presents the Merovingians as descendants of otherworldly intelligences, beings not unlike the Deep Ones, or elder gods, of Lovecraft mythology. These kings, she suggests, are literal hybrids, humans whose bloodline was modified or seeded by potentially interdimensional forces from the abyss, be they demons, fallen angels, or ancient sea deities. Twyman draws eerie parallels between the Merovingians' aquatic origins via the Quinator and Lovecraft's Dagon, the amphibious god worshipped by the monstrous Deep Ones. Just as Lovecraft's townsfolk interbred with the fish people to gain wealth and power at the cost of their souls, Twyman suggests the Merovingians may have struck a pact with some sort of submerged entities, gaining divine right and occult knowledge in exchange for carrying forward their genetic legacy into the human race. She further links this to ancient Gnostic ideas of the demiurge and prison planet cosmology, proposing that royal bloodlines serve as mediums or vessels for the continuation of these alien or demon entities, and to use them to exert their influence upon humanity. These families maintain ritual knowledge, occult symbology, and blood purity to preserve their roles as interfacing agents between humanity and the abyss. So in this narrative, history isn't random. It's shaped by invisible cults, secret rituals, and bloodlines that serve the old gods under the guise of earthly monarchies. Twyman even suggests that the Cthulhu mythos may not be fiction at all, but rather a sort of subliminal encoding of real esoteric truths and beliefs, a sort of psychic infection meant to prepare the modern world for the return of these submerged overlords, the old ones, who once ruled the seas the skies, and now the royal houses of men. On that note, let's revisit that bit about blue blood. Now, this is a very fascinating, symbolic, and biological overlap, and it hasn't gone unnoticed in certain esoteric and fringe circles. Octopuses have blue blood, if you'll remember my saying earlier. They have blue blood because they use hemocyanin, a copper-based molecule, instead of iron-based hemoglobin, like nearly every other animal. This also brings to mind the alleged metaphysical properties of that semi-mythical chemical dicyanin, which can be used to see auras or spirit creatures, but that's another rabbit hole altogether. Hemocyanin is more efficient in cold, low-oxygen environments like the deep, dark sea. This biological anomaly has fueled theories about cephalopods as aliens, ancient or futuristic, and abyssal intelligences. The phrase blue blood, from the Spanish sangre azul, refers to noble or aristocratic lineages. It originated with the Castilian nobility, who emphasized their pale skin and visible veins as proof of the purity of their bloodlines. Inbreeding, often contrasted with Moorish or common ancestry. Occult authors, conspiracy theorists, and symbolic speculationists, is that a word? Speculative symbology, we'll go with that, have long pointed out the eerie echo between royal bloodlines and cephalopod blood. Both are rare, cold, invisible yet foundational, and associated with hidden control. Cephalopods, in some modern esoteric frameworks, are used as a sort of totem or archetype for the hidden elite, deep controllers or priest kings. Tentacles could basically be a stand-in for control over multiple domains. Blue blood is the divine right to rule or otherworldly ancestry. Cephalopod camouflage abilities to remain unseen, manipulate perception. The imagery is very popular among conspiracy theorists, especially those exploring the octopus of Danny Casolaro, regarding the promised software and various global cabals. David Icke's shape-shifting elites, sometimes hinted at to have tentacled alien ancestry. Tracy Twyman's writings, which link bloodline elites to aquatic or netherworld beings. In fact, one could argue that the octopus is in itself the perfect totem or spirit animal for any massive conspiracy theory. Tentacles as control systems like the media, finance, military, tech, religion, royal families. No central brain, just fluid intelligence. Camouflage and deception like covert networks. Ink clouds as disinformation. Suckers as node of influence or as parasitic hooks. In alchemical and Rosicrucian symbolism, blue is often the color of spiritual nobility, initiation, and truth hidden in darkness. The octopus or squid is sometimes used as a metaphor for the occulted crown, a sovereign power that acts from the deep, unseen by the masses. Blue-blooded cephalopods, in this sense, become a sort of living symbol of ancient hidden dominion, depth, secrecy, selective revelation, psychic or cosmic royalty, not of this earth. And these aren't the only myths and legends about subaquatic entities and hybrid lineages. This is a surprisingly widespread theme across cultures. The idea that sea beings mating with humans, bestowing civilization, or creating divine or cursed hybrid lineages is fairly popular across world mythologies, legends, and folklores. And while octopuses, squid, and cephalopods are less often anthropomorphized in ancient myth than, say, fish or serpents, there are significant and eerie exceptions scattered across these world cultures. Many are tied to forbidden knowledge, ancient gods, shapeshifters, and the abyssal plane. And in some cases, they're directly linked to the origins of civilization or hybrid lineages in more esoteric or modern interpretations, with further examples which include in Japan. Always got to go there. There's the Ningyo, a type of mermaid or fish-human hybrid. It was believed that eating their flesh could grant immortality. In fact, there's a very popular legend about a Buddhist nun named Yao Bakuni who supposedly lived 800 years after accidentally eating the flesh of one of these creatures. Some local traditions hold that certain long-lived clans were descended from a Ningyo encounter, we'll say, with a human. Then you have the stories of the Marabito, who are supernatural visitors from the sea or distant mountains, sometimes said to be gods or wise spirits. In some tales, they mate with humans and leave behind, quote-unquote, divine offspring who become clan founders, or, more commonly, shamans. Once again, Poseidon, already been there, done that. That's your Greek/Roman, Neptune. Yeah. Ireland. There's Selkies. These are seal people who shed their skins to walk as humans. Children of Selkies and humans were said to be oddly gifted, melancholic, or touched by otherworldly powers. Then you have the Finn folk of Orkney Islands and Shetland, shape-shifting sea beings who kidnap and breed with humans to maintain their bloodlines. In Norse and Scandinavian myth and legend, you have the Havfru or the Havmand, which are sea maidens and mermen. Stories sometimes involving humans falling in love with them and producing hybrid children. You have the Draugr of the sea, known as the Sjödraugr. Some drowned men become these cursed undead entities, and others say that their descendants are marked and cursed lineages. In West Africa and Afro-Caribbean traditions, you've got Mamiwata, Yamaya, Olakun, water deities, often female, associated with seduction, wealth, and knowledge, sometimes believed to take lovers or spouses and create special hybrid children with spiritual powers. In Vodun, or Voodoo, and Santeria, some spiritual lineages actually trace their ancestry straight to these deities. In China, once again, you have the Dragon Kings, especially the Azure Dragon of the East Sea, who will sometimes sire children with human women. These hybrids are often spiritually gifted, long-lived, or fated for greatness. In Taoist hagiographies, some immortals are believed to be descended from undersea or celestial beings. In the Philippines, you have the Sirena and Kata, mermaid-like creatures in Visayan and Mindanaoan folklore. Some tales say children fathered by a Kata become babaylans, shamans, or have powers of divination and storm calling, weather control. Dagon, the fish god of the Philistines, was interpreted by some 19th and 20th century occultists as a hybridization myth. Occult texts from the Renaissance onward began associating sea monsters and sirens with alchemy, spiritual transmutation, and secret bloodlines. The Kraken is perhaps the most well-known mythical cephalopod, a giant squid or octopus that dwells in the deep waters and drags down ships to the depths. Later, occult reinterpretations, especially post-Lovecraft, linked the Kraken to primordial chaos gods and Atlantean cataclysms. The Aztec, you have Cipactli, a monstrous primordial sea creature, part crocodile, part fish, in some interpretations octopus-like, with many mouths and suction. The gods used her body to create the earth, making this a potential proto-cephalopod world mother figure. In the Philippines, once again, you have the Bakunawa, a serpent or dragon from the sea, but sometimes described with tentacles or suckers. It's said to rise from the ocean to swallow the moon, linking it to lunar cycles, madness, and transformation. In some regional variants, its children or servants are shapeshifters or witches. This is one of my particular favorites. Once again, back to Japan, you have Akoro Kumoi, an Ainu/Shinto deity. It's a giant red cephalopod from Ainu and Shinto legend, said to live in Funka Bay and be capable of healing or devouring entire ships. In fact, its, let's say, status as a healing deity, and I find this very fascinating, has made it essentially a default Shinto kami that is worshipped by the deformed or people who have suffered limb losses. Very strange, very strange. Some mystic and new religious movements interpret it as a guardian of the undersea realm, sometimes compare it to a benevolent sea dragon, but with a tentacled divine form. In fact, before it became an octopus deity, it was a spider deity. So, Octo, the Ocho, yeah. Now, to get into even weirder territory, as if that's possible, There are modern myths and fringe science. Some UFO religions and secret societies claim that, especially in Russia and Brazil, that cephalopods are extraterrestrials sent to guide and monitor humanity. Some human bloodlines are genetically linked to aquatic star ancestors. And cephalopods' alien-like biology, i.e. the distributed nervous system, color and shape-shifting, RNA editing especially, make them probable non-terrestrials in their eyes. There are 16th century sailor logs from Portuguese and Basque fishermen who describe octopus-faced women seen near the Azores, possibly misunderstood siren lore, but sometimes cited in occult circles as deep-sea hybrid survivors. In 19th century French symbolism, especially via authors like J.K. Huysmans, there's occasional symbolic use of tentacled entities as satanic or decadent symbols, foreshadowing their later esoteric significance, especially in regards to conspiracy theory structure. A few modern New Age channelers have even described visions of elder teachers with tentacled forms, claiming these beings taught geometry, language, or astrology to early humans via dreams or genetic memory. So, primordial or alien intelligences, founders or destroyers of civilization, progenitors of secret hybrid bloodlines, undersea analogs to the Watchers, or Nephilim, perhaps, teachers of psychic or magical knowledge, they are often portrayed as liminal beings, alien, ancient, and elusive, not gods in the human mold, but forces of mutation, transformation, and forbidden knowledge. There are multiple strands of documented folklore, fringe beliefs, and occult writings, and modern myths that regard cephalopods, especially the octopus and squid, as aliens, interdimensional beings, psychic or totemic entities, symbols of spiritual initiation and hidden knowledge. Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, a biologist and Potawatomi tribe writer, and others as well, note the extreme otherness of octopuses. 3 hearts, blue blood, RNA editing. The journal Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology from 2018, once again, published a peer-reviewed paper positing that octopus genes may originate from otherworldly panspermia, implying possible extraterrestrial origin. I just can't preface it enough. In some alien contactee reports, the abductors are described as tentacled or squid-like, particularly in Whitley Strieber's Communion follow-ups, John Mack's abduction case files. The Brazilian case of Antonio Villas-Boas describes fluidic aquatic motion and suction cup sensations. Yikes. Kenneth Grant, a major figure in the Typhonian OTO, interpreted Lovecraft's Old Ones, especially Cthulhu, as real psychic or interspecies intelligences accessible via ritual or dream. Cthulhu, often described as an octopoid god, was reinterpreted as a genuine entity from beyond space-time, claiming that Lovecraft was an inadvertent shaman. Clifothic ritual magic, as practiced by some left-hand path groups, invokes tentacled intelligences associated with chaos and pre-creation forces. Grant claimed that tentacled beings dwell in the quote-unquote tunnels of Set, psychic gateways through the Tree of Night or inverse Kabbalah. Andrew D. Chumley, founder of the cultist Sabati, described oceanic intelligences as eidolons or totemic patrons of pre-human sorcery. Some modern animists and oceanic neo-pagans adopt the octopus or squid as totem animals representing, once again, hidden knowledge, camouflage and deception, multiplicity of mind, emotional intelligence and adaptability. And chaos magic cephalopods are sometimes chosen as personal daemons or servitor forms representing fluidity, information manipulation, or access to the subconscious. An octopus is a self-replicating symbol. The tentacles represent divergent timelines or fragmented identities, a concept found in hypersigil workings by some modern magicians. And while fictional, H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos has evolved into a genuine occult paradigm for many groups. Cthulhu, as the giant cephalopod-headed being, sleeps in Erlaya, a sunken city in the South Pacific. His influence seeps into dreams and is described as telepathic or as a psychic entity reaching across dimensions. The idea of cephalopods as ancient alien psychic gods derives primarily from this mythos and has been embraced by chaos magicians, post-thelemic occultists, and UFO cults and fringe theories. Octosquid UFOs. reported sightings of aerial creatures with tentacles trailing in the sky, often associated with sky jellyfish phenomena or atmospheric beasts in Fortean literature, as often cited by one Trevor James Constable. There are ocean anomalies from the 1970s and 80s, such as several South American contactee cults in Chile and Brazil, reporting received visions or messages from quote-unquote oceanic masters and quote-unquote tentacled ones dwelling in undersea bases. And this, in particular, this is one of the more obscure but intensely weird corners of South American ufology and occultism at its intersection. The 1970s and 80s saw a surge of contactee cults and esoteric UFO movements in Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina. And among their visions and teachings, some groups reported communication with these oceanic intelligences, often described as tentacled, aquatic, or cephalopoid in nature. You have the Grupo Rama, not Gruporama, but Grupo, Grupo, Rama, R-A-M-A, or in its native language, I believe it's Misión Rama. Though based in Peru, Misión Rama had a strong Brazilian offshoot in the 1970s. It was founded by a fellow by the name of Sixto Paz Wells. This contactee group claimed to be in touch with extraterrestrial masters living in underground and undersea bases. While most Rama beings were described as human-like, some later accounts from Brazilian satellites of the group mention quote-unquote tentacled telepathic masters who were not physically visible but appeared in dreams or trance sessions. These entities were said to dwell in a Pacific trench near Easter Island, described as the Puerto de los Antiguos. And what's weird is that Ingo Swann, of all people, as well as other remote viewers, have said that near Easter Island and several other places in the Pacific, they've also more or less encountered what seem to be tentacled aquatic intelligences. But they spoke of returning at the time of, these beings, that is, spoke of returning at the time of planetary purification, whatever the hell that means, and were said to be guarding the forgotten Atlantean archives beneath the seabed. Then you've got a group called Ciudad de Luz. I think I'm saying that right. Ciudad de Luz, or City of Light, started by João Francisco de Silva. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these foreign names. Can't be helped sometimes. In the early 1980s, this Brazilian medium named João Francisco de Silva founded the City of Light spiritual movement. During a series of automatic writings and psychographies, just a fancy term for automatic writing, De Silva claimed contact with Os Mestres Marinhos, or marine masters. These were not humans or angels, but described as, quote, luminous beings with many eyes and arms, like octopuses of light, who speak through vibration and color, not sound. They taught that human evolution had been steered from undersea crystal domes, and that true spiritual ascent would begin with the quote-unquote awakening of the deep memory, a concept eerily similar to Lovecraftian inherited knowledge. Their underwater base was said to be located off the coast of Florianopolis. The group later fragmented, and much of this material only exists in mimeograph newsletters and private translogs. There's also the quote-unquote tentacle guardians of Laguna Negra, Uruguay. A lesser-known but very strange series of 1970s and 80s reports came from UFO investigators and contactees near Laguna Negra, a large lagoon on the Uruguayan coast. Multiple experiencers described dream contacts and trance states in which they saw, quote, beings with floating arms, like seaweed or tentacles, moving in slow harmony, watching with glowing blue eyes. Some claim that these quote-unquote guardians would rise from the water during magnetic disturbances and were the true architects of pre-Tupi civilization. One contactee, named Don Raul, claimed these entities had been misidentified as devils by the Jesuits and that the Order of Christ had hidden their true nature in lost colonial archives. If anyone is interested in this, I got these from non-English sources, so I could have some of the translation a bit mixed up, but yeah, if you want to check into these, the sources for this are Sixto Paz Wells, who wrote Los Guías Extraterrestres, There's the archives of Revista Planeta Brazil. There are translogs published in the Ciudad de Luz internal bulletins. Daniel Russo Marcahuasi? Daniel Russo is the author. Marcahuasi, La Historia Fantástica de un Descubrimiento, touches on undersea cultures linked to Pacific beings. Fabio Zerpa, Argentine UFO researcher, noted multiple underwater contact accounts in Más Allá de la Cuarta Dimensión. Cephalopod intelligences, as considered by scientists like Peter Godfrey Smith of Other Minds, point out that they have evolved intelligence completely independently of vertebrates, as mentioned before. So their neural architecture, being distributed across their body with semi-autonomous independence throughout, are connected to conspiracy and paranormal threads as evidence of potential ultra-terrestrial biology, an intelligence not evolved on Earth, but adapted to it, and some have called octopuses hyper-adaptive probes placed here to observe. In early 20th century occult science, particularly by a group I don't want to mention right now, just for this purpose, because I'm planning a full episode on them and I don't want to give it away. But yeah, we're going to get into this group big time, not too far down the road. They have descriptions of etheric or plasmic beings that mirror cephalopod morphology, described as, quote, luminous, floating, with shifting tendrils, no bones, and a great central eye. These were often channeled by psychics as, quote unquote, guardians of the thresholds, or entities who move between vibrational planes, or as emissaries of Sirius or Arcturus. Some trance mediums claim that the cephalopodic form is simply the closest our minds can render a being whose shape is fluid, fractal, and multidimensional. As mentioned earlier, in the U.S. military remote viewing programs such as Stargate and Grillflame, there were rumors of viewers encountering psychic resistance when targeting deep ocean locations. The most often ones are south of Easter Island, near the Tonga Trench. Some describe so-called, quote-unquote, blinking entities, quote-unquote, black spirals, or a sensation of being watched by many minds at once, not human, not machine. Declassified documents do not confirm this, but Ingo Swann, as mentioned before, spoke of deep mind contact while remote viewing certain underwater sites. And remote viewers allegedly describe beings with arm-like fields or peripheral minds. As mentioned earlier, several UFO flap reports from South America and also the Philippines in the 70s described flying translucent or jellyfish-like entities with trailing tentacles. These are sometimes referred to as sky jellyfish or atmospheric beasts by the also aforementioned Trevor James Constable. Reports often describe them changing color, pulsing, and vanishing suddenly. Some fringe theorists argue that these plasma-based ultra-terrestrials, possibly even higher-dimensional cephalopods, maybe, monitoring the upper atmosphere. Constable believed that they were invisible to the naked eye, but could be photographed in infrared. If you check out some of his books, he's got some pretty compelling... I mean, they're mostly in black and white, so it'd be nice to see if, I don't know, they could edit that into color, but they're fairly compelling, I will say that. He's getting pictures of something up in the sky, and they're strange, amorphous, amoeboid entities, sort of. And then, of course, we got to throw in some drug trips. In the context of DMT and salvia trips, numerous users on forums like Arrowid and DMT Nexus have described being surrounded by tentacled entities, feeling one's body as being read or felt by intelligent arms, seeing massive kaleidoscopic octopus gods made of language and light. Occultists often interpret these experiences as encounters with non-human intelligences that choose symbolic forms based on our expectations or archetypal symbols. And Terence McKenna made an assertion that intelligence can be cephalopoid, not anthropoid, as far as relation to the machine elves of legend and lore. But the anomalous connections to royal bloodlines and the potential for occult eugenics aren't the only high strangeness emerging from the abyssal plains. Beneath the waves lies an entire tradition of aquatic occultism, a fluid cosmology where oceans act as portals to other realms, and the creatures within them embody intelligences that defy terrestrial logic. Across the spectrum of chaos magic, spiritualism, and fringe science, water has long been seen as an element of dissolution, transformation, and hidden gnosis. Deep-sea entities, especially cephalopods, are cast not just as cryptids or aliens, but as emissaries of a vast unknowable intelligence. Their very biology seems symbolic: distributed minds, camouflage, ink as deception, limbs that grasp across dimensions, etc. In ritual and psychic traditions, the ocean mirrors the unconscious, an abyss to scry, to sink into, to be unmade within. Esoteric groups invoke the sea as both a womb and a grave, a liminal zone where the self devolves and quote-unquote other intelligences whisper from below. And these aren't just monsters of folklore, they're guardians of the thresholds, they're archetypes of post-human awareness, some kind of hyper-evolved mutants of some kind, or perhaps echoes of something older than myth itself. Aquatic occultism refers to a loosely connected set of mystical, esoteric, and symbolic systems that emphasize water, especially oceans, lakes, and aquatic beings, as the primary domain of hidden knowledge, altered states, and non-human intelligence. It's not a formal school like Hermeticism or Thelema, but it's a rich undercurrent running through mythology, chaos magic, Lovecraftian horror, and modern paranormal thought, as well as ufology. In nearly every tradition, water is the liminal element or portal between worlds. In Greek mythology, you've got Lethe and the river Styx, which are the rivers of forgetting and passage into and across the underworld. In Norse mythology, you have the Well of Mimir, which is the source of secret wisdom. In Celtic mythologies, there's all kinds of sacred lakes, wells, misty islands like Avalon, often inhabited by shape-shifting entities almost across the board. In Gnosticism and occultism, the abyss separates the material from the divine, a boundary-dissolving agent of identity, time, space, everything. This is why many esoteric groups are tied to submersion, drowning symbolism, baptisms, or diving as descent into hidden truth. Mermaids, sirens, undines, sea serpents, these are all agents of seduction, danger, or revelation. In chaos magic and modern esoteric mythos, there are beings that are often post-human, extra-dimensional, or symbolic of unconscious intelligence. Octopuses, squids, jellyfish, deep-sea creatures that become proxies for unknowable forces. Lovecraftian beings, once again, living myths slumbering in the deep, ancient intelligences that can wait for the mind to be prepared. These aren't just monsters, but Gnostic guardians of occult truth. The abyss isn't just metaphorical, it's often used in ritual and initiation. In the Kabbalistic tree of life, Da'ath and the abyss represent a divide between the ego and the transcendent self. Crossing it means death of identity, often depicted as immersion or drowning. Compare this to the psychological feeling of being lost at sea, disoriented, ego dissolved, overwhelmed, maddening. To plunge into the deep is to surrender to the currents of the unknown, much like the currents of rivers and oceans. Water is also used in the art of scrying. It's just dark bowls, mirrors, reflective pools. Spirits are said to move through water currents, especially in rivers and wells. In spiritualism and borderland science, water is linked to ectoplasm, aether, and plasma, or fluid states between matter and spirit. Mediums entering trance often describe fluid sensations or floating consciousness. Buddhist monks or people who have meditated to a certain degree often feel the dissolution of ego as they are overwhelmed by an ocean of consciousness or oneness. Some theorize that water enhances psychic ability due to electromagnetic conductivity, brainwave entrainment, and archetypal links to the unconscious. Chaos magicians often associate water with entropy, mutation, uncertainty. Rituals involving drifting, disorientation, or cephalopod gnosis There's Typhonian magic, Transyogothian magic. The great old ones, as aquatic or amphibious beings from the void, are often invoked in rituals using the sea as a cosmic, once again, womb and grave. Some radical modern traditions even use sensory deprivation tanks or immersion rites to induce ego death, enhance contact with non-human intelligences, or achieve altered time-space perception, like floating through eternity. So cephalopods, especially octopuses, and aquatic occultism represent fluid intelligence, camouflaged awareness, tentacled consciousness reaching into other realms. Their alien biology makes them perfect totems for magical thinking that transcends the human terrestrial paradigm. This is why they've become mascots or gods in some magical orders, and even a few, Discordian currents. Mystics and psychedelic users alike, once again, they often describe that oceanic feeling, a blissful merging with the infinite, the dissolution of boundaries between the self and the cosmos. Water doesn't just symbolize the unconscious, it's the medium through which consciousness becomes something other than itself, mutates into a whole new thing. Now, let's close out. Now, let's get into some alleged encounters with tentacled cryptids and alleged extraterrestrial cephalopods. And just a quick note, I chose to overlook some of the more obvious cases, such as giant squids, since we know now for a fact that they exist, as well as stories like the nameless thing of Berkeley Square, the oil pit squid, although this particular cryptid, if these accounts are true, that's a whole new evolutionary mutation. It's just a whole nother can of calamari to open, so I don't know. I may come back to that or include that in a potential 1.5 on this. And then there's also Organism 46B, because in all likelihood, that's probably just a creepypasta. The Russian scientist that supposedly found this in classified documents, there's no record of this dude existing whatsoever, so very likely creepypasta. And then, of course, you also have the Lake Baikal swimmers, and these are all indeed very interesting. Some of my favorite stories may, in fact, have some kernels of truth in them, but these have essentially been covered fairly well by many others, and I personally just like to bring you fine folks the most obscure accounts I can find when it comes to this kind of stuff. Actually, once again, I had to cut quite a bit from this episode because I wasn't really sure whether or not people would really be into listening to 3+ hours of ultra-terrestrial cephalopod nonsense. But if y'all are interested, once again, I don't know, do a deleted scenes type thing. I also like to note that I'm trying to keep it to mostly cephalopod or tentacled humanoid entities, but there are quite a few accounts of UFOs themselves displaying tentacles to different degrees and in a variety of ways. This once again begs the question that Trevor James Constable alluded to, that some UFOs may in fact be organic entities. So, having said all that, let's jump into some accounts. Location, Blue Hill Bay, Maine. 1987, late evening. 2 experienced hunters were navigating the dense coastal marshlands near Blue Hill Bay when they suddenly spotted a large humanoid figure emerging from the thick underbrush. The creature was described as tall and shambling, its gait uneven and unsettling. Its limbs appeared disproportionately long, with arms hanging past its knees, swinging loosely as it moved. Most strikingly, instead of a conventional head, the creature bore a tangled mass of writhing appendages atop its shoulders, tentacle-like limbs that writhed and twisted in constant motion. The appendages gave the impression of a cephalopodic cluster rather than any familiar mammalian feature. A pungent ammonia-like odor, once again ammonia odors, emanated from the being, intensifying the eerie atmosphere of the encounter. Upon noticing the hunters, the creature emitted a low, guttural sound and retreated swiftly back into the marsh, disappearing into the murky waters and thick vegetation. The witnesses were left shaken, unable to fully comprehend what they had encountered. Cryptozoologists and paranormal researchers who later examined the report noted that unusual cephalopod characteristics, suggesting the creature might represent a hybrid between a swamp-dwelling Sasquatch and an octopus-like entity. Some dubbed it the swamp squib, a name reflecting its ambiguous nature, straddling the line between known cryptids and deep-sea horrors. The first, but definitely not the last, of what we'll encounter like this. The source on this is compiled from regional eyewitness accounts archived in the Maine Cryptid Journal, 1988, as well as personal interviews with the original witnesses and analysis by cryptozoologist Dr. Elaine Harper in personal correspondence, not between me and her, but with others, in 1990. Next up, location, Palau Ubin Island, Singapore, 1954. A group of plantation workers reported a startling encounter near the mangrove swamps of Palau Ubin Island as twilight descended. The witnesses described seeing a humanoid figure emerge from the dense mangrove thicket, moving with an unnatural fluidity that immediately unsettled them. The creature was humanoid in overall shape, but unlike any known animal or human. Its body appeared slick and boneless, covered in a smooth, purplish membrane that shimmered faintly in the fading light. Instead of typical hands, its arms tapered to slender points, giving the impression of delicate but unnervingly flexible limbs. Several witnesses noticed a faint, eerie bioluminescent glow emanating from the creature's body, casting an otherworldly light on the surrounding foliage. The workers reported that the creature moved silently, slipping back into the mangrove with remarkable speed and grace before disappearing from sight. The encounter left them deeply shaken, with many drawing comparisons to local folklore. This encounter may connect to regional Southeast Asian legends such as the Orang Minyak or Oily Man. Oof, that's particularly creepy. A notorious supernatural figure said to glide through villages covered in slippery oil, or Hantu Era, which are water ghosts and spectral entities tied to aquatic environments. However, the detailed physical description and bioluminescence strongly diverge from traditional folkloric accounts, leaning instead to imagery evocative of Lovecraftian cephalopodic horrors. The slick, boneless appearance and faint glowing suggest a creature more akin to an alien or eldritch being than a simple ghost or human-like spirit. The source for this is compiled from oral testimonies collected by local folklore researcher Tan Wei Ling in 1955, archives from the Singapore Paranormal Society 1970, and comparative analysis in Asian Cryptid Compendium by Wynn and Patel from 2004. Next up, Ohio River near Evansville, Kentucky/Indiana border, 1959. Through the late 1950s, several local newspapers in Kentucky and Indiana reported unusual sightings of a mysterious creature along the banks of the Ohio River near Evansville. Witnesses described the entity as a disturbing humanoid figure with slick, rubbery skin that gleamed wetly under the river's fading light. Its arms were notably long and tipped with suction-like structures reminiscent of cephalopod suckers rather than human fingers. One eyewitness recalled the creature moving in a slithering, undulating manner, more akin to serpentine motion than typical bipedal walking. The creature's gait, combined with its slick texture, lent it an otherworldly and unsettling appearance. Reports also mentioned an acrid, chemical-like smell in the area during some encounters, raising suspicions about environmental factors influencing the creature's existence. The initial wave of sightings generated local curiosity, but quickly faded for mainstream news, as they tend to do. However, cryptozoologists and paranormal investigators later revisited the case, drawing connections between the reports and hypotheses about mutant cephalopod-like cryptids. The Ohio River region, with its industrial pollution and chemical runoff from nearby plants, became a focal point for speculation that mutations or deep river aquatic anomalies might give rise to such a creature. Some theorists suggest that the Octoman, as it has been called several times apparently, could be a hybrid or a new species of aquatic cryptid emerging from the environmental disruption. The combination of humanoid and cephalopod features, along with its reported movement and habitat, places it among a small but growing category of tentacled cryptids linked to polluted or mysterious waterways. Ugh, just enslathered in goo. And enslathered is a perfectly cromulent word, by the way. The source on this is extracted from the archives of the Evansville Courier, 1959, the Kentucky Post, also 1959, and later cryptozoological analyses published in Cryptid Quarterly, 1984, and Aquatic Anomalies Journal by Reed and Johnson, 1992. Next up, Amazon Rainforest, Brazil, 1996. This is shortly after a thunderstorm. Members of the remote Yanomami village deep in the Amazon reported a chilling encounter following a fierce thunderstorm. According to tribal witnesses, a mysterious creature was observed crawling through the dense forest canopy. The entity was described as having, quote, long ropes for arms, unquote, which writhed and coiled like flexible tendrils and a single glowing red eye that pierced the gloom. The creature's surface shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence, and it appeared to absorb surrounding light, creating an unnatural shadow around itself. Look up Vanta Black if you're not familiar with it. It's the perfect shadowy entity, blacker than black color. Its presence was accompanied by a series of clicking sounds that tribal members likened to the echoing noises made by octopuses underwater, lending a distinctly cephalopodic auditory signature to the encounter. Despite its alien features, the creature was embedded in the tribe's rich spiritual lore. The Yanomami identified it as a karai, a forest demon or quote-unquote spirit of the drowned, believed to rise during intense rain and lightning storms. The karai is traditionally thought to be a harbinger of danger and a guardian of sacred waters, embodying the mysterious and often hostile forces of the jungle. The karai legend serves as both a spiritual warning and a cultural explanation for strange phenomena in the rainforest, particularly following weather events that disrupt the natural order. The cephalopod-like features described in the encounter, its tentacle-like limbs, bioluminescent qualities, and aquatic sounds, suggest a fascinating blend of indigenous myth and cryptid phenomena, possibly indicating cross-cultural interpretations of some elusive, possibly unknown creature native to the region. Source on this is field notes from anthropologist Dr. Marina Silva's 1997 expedition, collected from oral testimonies recorded in Yanomami Myth and Mystery by Silva and Almeida, 2001, and Comparative Cryptid Studies in South American Mysteries by Rodriguez, 2010. It should also be noted that Brazil, actually all over the Amazon area, the Amazon River area, there are frequent accounts of shape-shifting pink dolphins who very much get randy with humans. So you can add that to the list. All of the following accounts from here on, unless noted otherwise, are either going to come from Albert Rosales' Humanoid Encounter series or George Metrovec's Strange Phenomena Almanac or Database. Once again, unless noted otherwise. So, near Mount St. Helens, Washington State, August 1981, at approximately 8:30 p.m., two amateur wildlife photographers, Roger Melton and Dan Alvarez, were hiking through a dense forest trail near the base of Mount St. Helens when they encountered what they initially believed to be a bear or possibly a Sasquatch. The pair had been attempting to document elk activity near a remote stream bed when a series of guttural, wet clicking sounds interrupted the quiet of the forest. As the two crept forward with their equipment, they observed a large humanoid figure crouched beside the water. At first glance, the creature resembled a traditional Bigfoot, tall, hairy, upright. Could be any one of us, especially me. But as they continued watching, strange details emerged. Its quote-unquote fur seemed to shimmer and undulate, as if moist or semi-translucent, and its arms were abnormally long, ending in appendages that writhed independently, very much like tentacles. When the creature stood upright, its full height was estimated at around 7.5 feet tall. It turned slowly to face the men, revealing a face that was unlike any known primate, blank, smooth, and rubbery, with rows of tiny glistening black eyes arranged vertically on either side of its broad head. No nose was visible, and its mouth seemed to split open horizontally, ringed with short, flexible tendrils. Paralyzed with fear, the two men could only watch as the entity emitted a high-pitched trilling sound. The forest around them fell completely silent. A moment later, the creature seemed to sense their presence. Several tentacle-like limbs unfolded from behind its back, swaying in the air like antennae. One of the limbs extended towards the air, brushing through the undergrowth with unnatural speed. Roger managed to snap 2 photographs before they fled. Both men later claimed that their watches stopped working and that they felt nauseous and disoriented for hours afterwards. When the film was developed, one of the photos came back blank. The other showed only a blur of motion and a distorted humanoid shape that experts were unable to conclusively identify. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 separate campers in the same area reported hearing suction cup sounds at night, and seeing tall figures with glowing eyes near the tree lines. Some local indigenous accounts speak of a being known as Tsikakwe, a water-dwelling forest creature described as having both ape-like and cephalopod features, said to emerge only in the deepest fogs after volcanic activity. Despite no physical evidence being recovered, the so-called octosquatch became the subject of local legend, cryptid forums, and fringe zoological discussions, particularly due to the striking combination of deep-sea creature traits with terrestrial primate features. This is compiled from The Mysterious Northwest, Volume 2, 1994, Regional Folklore and Private Correspondence with Field Researchers Roger Melton and Dan Alvarez. Next up, we've got Vladivostok, Russia, 1990. A 32-year-old metalworker named Victor reportedly experienced an alien abduction. Under hypnosis, Victor recalled being inside a white, square-shaped room with round windows. He described encountering a being named Galina, who resembled his wife, but was clearly not her. This entity led him into another area where he was struck by some form of energy or force, causing him to lose consciousness. He later awoke in the same unfamiliar room. Inside the room was another figure, a small man dressed in black. Victor was interrogated by these beings who pressured him to reveal information he did not possess. At one point, a different humanoid being, distinct from the smaller figure, approached and examined Victor's torso. Once again, he fainted. Victor was missing for several days. Upon his return home, his real wife alerted investigators. Medical examiners revealed unusual cross-shaped marks on his body at the points where the beings had touched him. Victor would go on to vanish 2 more times. During a later hypnosis session, he recalled further disturbing encounters involving alien creatures, screens, and tentacles making contact with his body. He remained under medical supervision for some time following these events. This one is from awesome paranormal researcher Paul Stonehill, The Soviet UFO Files. Omsk, Russia, fall 1927. A laborer near Omsk was awakened in the middle of the night by loud braying sounds coming from his barn, where several horses were kept. Suspecting thieves, he rushed to investigate. As he opened the barn door, the 2 terrified horses bolted out, knocking him to the ground. Regaining his composure, he retrieved a flashlight and, joined by several neighbors who had gathered after hearing the commotion, entered the barn. Inside, they discovered the interior coated in thousands of fine, silvery, hair-like strands that were surprisingly tough and resistant to cutting. As they moved toward the center of the barn, they noticed a large hole in the roof. Near a pile of hay, they spotted an unusual creature lying on the ground. It was described as a round white mass about the size of a pumpkin, pulsating with a steady rhythm. Bizarrely, the entity bore faint traces of human-like facial features. Suddenly it rolled toward a nearby wall, sprouting several tentacle-like appendages from the top of its head. Alarmed, the men grabbed sticks and axes and attacked the creature, ultimately reducing it to a bluish-white pulp. This is from Peter Colosimo's book, Sombra en las Estrellas. Next up, we've got near Carril, Salta Province, Argentina, November 29th, 2003. 5 individuals were traveling in a truck driven by Benito Salvo when a sudden outburst from him jolted everyone awake. He was shouting, "Look, it's a UFO!" At first, the other passengers saw nothing, but the truck soon pulled over to the side of the road. Benito and a few others stepped out and spotted a strange object about 4 blocks away, partially concealed among cactus bushes. The object emitted several flickering lights, with a prominent red light moving rhythmically up and down on top. Julio Espinoza, the main witness, asked if anyone would accompany him to investigate more closely, but none of the others agreed. Probably the right move. Leaving his young daughter with the group, Julio approached the object alone. As he drew within a few meters, he was struck by a sudden wave of intense heat that left him paralyzed. Standing there, he observed a humanoid figure clad in white near a massive vessel, which abruptly shone a blinding beam of light on him. Shielding his eyes, Julio ducked behind a large cactus in terror, convinced the figure had seen him. From his hiding spot, Julio watched the white-suited humanoid ascend and float back into the craft. He described the object as enormous, supported by 3 spider-like legs. Around its perimeter extended 3 hose-like appendages resembling octopus tentacles, which writhed in zigzag motions. Each tentacle ended in an eye-like light that illuminated the surroundings with an intense white glow. The entire area fell into an eerie silence. As Julio tried to crawl away, he was overtaken by a strange sensation that made escape feel impossible. Suddenly, he saw 7 glowing humanoid figures descend from the craft just as its bright lights went out. The object then appeared to vanish into thin air. disappearing without moving. In a surreal haze, Julio questioned whether the event was real or a dream. The 7 identical glowing beings moved in a slow single-file procession, gliding just above the ground. Each had a bright light in the solar plexus area. The leader wore a red coverall while the others were dressed in black or gray. One by one, each figure paused beside a cactus and either placed or retrieved something using their unusually long arms. Julio couldn't tell which. Worried about his daughter and fearing he'd be left behind, Julio stood up and ran back to the truck where he found everyone already inside. When Benito asked what he'd seen, Julio downplayed it, simply replying, "Just some people." As the truck pulled away, the bright white lights in the area turned on once more. In the days that followed, Julio began experiencing a series of vivid, lucid dreams involving strange beings standing next to his bed. In one such dream, a being warned him not to speak to the media again. They told him that everything that would happen had already been written. They spoke of a future war and signs in the sky that would precede their return. Their message was urgent. Humanity must learn to coexist with nature or face extinction. It's a very common message from these beings. It's almost as if they live here already and are very invested in the state of things here. That's just speculation, though. This is from Sciencia Ovni Burgos, by the way. Next up, I think this is all either George Mitrovic or Albert Rosales from here out, actually. In the middle of March 1978 in Mesa in Maricopa County in Arizona around 2 a.m., James Minton was up late reading when he heard a loud humming sound coming from outside. Going out to investigate, he was stunned to see a large hovering disc encased in a purple haze, hovering very close to the ground. As his fear became curiosity, he approached the object. Suddenly, close to the object, a humanoid figure began to materialize. It became a man-like figure wearing a brilliant greenish outfit, a wide belt, and a pair of tight-fitting boots. It stood there and stared at James and appeared to have some type of emblem on its chest and what appeared to be luminous tentacle-like appendages emanating from the top of its head. Psychic tentacles, perhaps? The humanoid carried some type of instrument in his hands. After performing several tasks around the object and completely ignoring the witness, the strange being disappeared into the purplish haze that surrounded the object, seemingly blended into it. The object then rose up and disappeared from night. You know, also speaking of purple haze, Jimi Hendrix and his band had an alien encounter. It's true. Well, I mean, it's true that they at least think they had an alien encounter, I'll say that much. On the 30th of January 1959 at Covington in Kenton County in Kentucky, a woman reported seeing a strange creature that was grayish in color with a lopsided chest, ugly tentacles and rolls of fat running horizontally over a bald head. 2 hours before, just across the border near New Richmond in Claremont County in Ohio, a truck driver on U.S. Route 52 saw a bizarre, gray, ugly creature with tentacles crossing the road ahead of his truck. These were 2 separate reports of the same unusual creature. This one's one of my favorites. It's also I said we'd have more Octo-Squatched. Here we go. At Puerto Badazar in Vizcaya, Spain, in summer of 1961, at 11 p.m., 29-year-old trucker Archimedes Sanchez, I shit you not, that's his name, and his partner were on their way to offload some merchandise when the headlights of the truck illuminated a strange figure standing on the side of the road on the embankment. They stopped the truck and focused the headlights on the figure, described as about 1.10 to 1.20 meters in height. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say that's probably roughly 6 to 7 feet, and resembling a quote-unquote hairy octopus, rust red in color. Its body was completely covered in a rust-colored hair. The strange creature was standing just on the side of the road, and when the headlights shone on him, he covered his eyes with one of his tentacles. According to the witness, the creature had at least 4 tentacle-like arms. After observing the creature for several minutes in which the creature did not move, Sanchez told his partner to grab a jackhammer and attack the creature. His partner promptly refused the request. Good call. Sanchez then backed up his truck and then drove straight towards the creature, though the creature did not budge and just seemed to step back as the truck stopped. Once it could not go any further, due to the very steep embankment. The witness repeated this maneuver several times with the same results. The only movement on the part of the creature was when it covered its round, glowing eyes with one of its tentacles. Another truck drove by and did not stop. Its occupant apparently did not see the creature. Sanchez and his partner finally decided to leave and drove into town without telling anyone about their strange encounter, until many years later. At 6 a.m. on August 16, 1968, in Sierra del Alamos Tivisa, Tarragona, in Catalonia, Spain, a farmer named Mateo walked toward a light, found a very luminous hemispherical object hovering 3 feet above the ground. On the far side of it, he saw about 100 yards away and hurrying towards it 2 creatures resembling octopuses, about 3 feet in height with quote-unquote 4 or 5 legs, very light in color and thoroughly disgusting. The UFO left a large area of burnt grass and watches stopped 3 times on the site. It's another interesting, I don't know, the whole watch stoppage thing. It shows up in a lot of these encounters, or anecdotal evidence of these encounters. Very strange. Space-time chicanery. Sometime in 1885, Captain W. Hopkins of the schooner Mary Ogilvy in waters off Australia saw an immense creature which he took to be a species of octopus. His attention had been drawn to it at first by a perfect cloud of seabirds who at first he thought were feeding on a dead carcass. On approach, it was found to be alive, though sluggishly disporting itself in the water. The body resembled a gigantic violin with some 6 feelers about the great diameter of the violin. The creature lay almost flat upon the water and was a dark gray color above and a light gray color underneath, and was continually elevating one of its feelers, which were twice the thickness of a man's arm, to a height of 6 feet. The animal appeared to be vomiting, and that is what had attracted the multitude of seabirds who were feeding on the vomit. Delish. The captain decided that the size of the creature was so great that it had grasped the ship in its feelers. It could have easily capsized the vessel as quickly as possible. Was this a dying giant squid, the species of which has been discovered in the southern waters off Australia? Or was it something else that would never be seen again? In October 1980, near Toluca in Mexico State, Mexico, one evening, Anton Ribeiro, in company of his wife and another person, were driving in a desert area about 30 kilometers from Toluca when suddenly the engine of their vehicle stalled without any apparent reason. A bluish flash of light streaked from the sky about 50 meters from the car. The 3 witnesses then watched a large, conical-shaped craft resting on the ground on 4 feet-like protrusions. 4 figures or things, also of conical form, emerged from the object. The figures had shiny, tentacle-like protrusions. Using these tentacles, the figures moved quickly near the astounded witnesses, apparently collecting rock and soil samples and some plants. Minutes later, the figures went back into the object, and then there was a bright blue flash, and the object disappeared. The vehicle engine soon began operating again. At 11:30 p.m. in 1971 in Cayo Margarita, Puerto Rico, the witness, one Charles LeBreton, was alone fishing in an isolated cay in knee-deep water when he noticed something in the water that resembled a stingray, and he tried to grab it, but the spear went right through it. It was something white and gelatinous. It apparently swam away, and being curious, he decided to follow it. He then came face to face with a strange glowing figure. The figure's body seemed to be covered with hundreds of shiny dots. The creature had an oval-shaped head, and at the spot where the eyes should have been, it had 2 V-shaped holes from which an orange-yellow light shone. He did not see a mouth, nose, or ears. The creature's extremities resembled those of an elephant's trunk or tentacles. The stunned witness was unable to move, but soon a strange calm came over him. Soon the strange being began to communicate with the witness by using telepathy. He was asked numerous questions on subjects that he did not know anything about, but somehow was able to answer all the questions at length. After a while, LeBreton began noticing the creature's body features and was able to make out a sort of paunchy stomach and hips. It seems to have a soft texture devoid of any bones. At the end of its arms, it had what appeared to be octopus-like suckers. The witness also noticed about 500 feet away several other similar beings that seemed to glide above the water at times, bending down as if picking up something from the water. A strange silence permeated the area, and he also noticed a bright bluish-white light that shone from under the water from a nearby undersea lagoon. Suddenly, the communication with the being ceased, and two of the other creatures glided over, positioning themselves, one on each side of the creature that had been communicating with Le Breton. Then they all three turned around and left, joining the rest of the creatures. The witness was then able to move and heard something in his head telling him to leave the area. He did, but continued fishing nearby. He did not see the creatures depart. A strange, dark, cylindrical cloud hovered over the area, occasionally sending bright flashes of light towards the surface of the ocean. In Saga Prefecture, Japan, late on the night of January 4th, 1992, a farmer that had experienced strange cattle mutilations in the past was awakened by the sound of his dog barking. The farmer went to investigate, and upon entering the cowshed saw a small white quote-unquote object resembling a jellyfish with numerous tentacle-like protrusions coming out of its bottom. Okay. The object, quote-unquote, was floating in the air. It then drifted outside, where it vanished. A cow was discovered on the floor, and it had a badly broken leg. So apparently, the moo-moo got mauled. I have tons more of these, but like I said, I'm trying to keep this episode under 2 hours. So, yeah. But yeah. This is all highly speculative as far as the cryptid lore goes, but I don't know. The entire... Oh, that's over 2 hours. Okay. I'm trying to keep this under 3 hours. Yeah. A lot of this is very much documented by scientific studies. I mean, the alien nature, quote unquote, alien nature of the octopus is very well noted. This is documented scientific stuff. The psychic abilities, or the potential thereof to have psychic abilities, is very intriguing. Man, I got into all kinds of stuff on this, like speculative evolutionary theories on the future development of cephalopod evolution. Just a lot of weird avenues and rabbit holes. I looked into this book called Tentacles Longer Than Night by one Eugene Thacker, who wrote In the Dust of This Earth. And he goes into a whole crazy, like, just metaphysical, philosophical rabbit hole on just the symbology of tentacles in horror and occultism. Just, there's so many places this can go, but like I said, under 3 hours. So, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. This is another sort of sub-installment of our ultra-terrestrial overlords. So there'll be, reoccurring episodes of this nature, and I've got one in the works where, like I said, there was a group earlier, I didn't want to mention by name, but coming up soon, we will have what could quite possibly, and I'm pretty certain is, the first modern era ultra-terrestrial theory. And it's an overlap of ufology with occultism, and it's crazy. There's government documentation involved in it, and just all kinds of crazy shit. Anywho, okay. I hope you enjoyed this episode. This is a literal deep dive. I think I used that joke already. Into the abyss, and looking at just the weird ultra-terrestrial occult connections through the folklore and mythology of teachers from the sea interbreeding with these things, and just the overall alien nature of octopuses, which once again is the proper plural term. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for being here with me. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for the likes and the comments and everything. And thanks for subscribing. If you haven't already, please do. Yeah, like and subscribe, etc. Really appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening once again. My name is Mike. This is Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclast podcast. Tune in next week. We're going to take a bit of a departure from all the ultra-terrestrial shenanigans, but we'll be back into it again very soon. So. We're going to have a bit of a true crime thing next week, but with a twist, a supernatural twist. So tune in for that. And once again, thank you guys. Love you all. Appreciate you listening. See you next week. Peace.
I am the octopus.